Oh, you want to know about the great Zephyrian predator cub incident of 2387? Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because this is the kind of story that makes seasoned xenobiologists question their life choices and has diplomatic corps reaching for the strongest alcohol they can legally consume. It all started on Research Station Kepler 442b, which, and I cannot stress this enough, was supposed to be a nice, quiet, boring assignment studying the local flora. You know, the kind of job where the most dangerous thing you encounter is a particularly aggressive flower that might give you a mild rash. The kind of place where humans go when they want to pretend they're not the galaxy's favorite chaos magnets. Enter Dr. Rebecca Becca Martinez, xenobotanist extraordinaire and professional human disaster waiting to happen. Now, Becca was what we in the scientific community like to call enthusiastic. And by enthusiastic, I mean the kind of person who sees a sign that says, "Danger, do not touch," and immediately thinks, "Challenge accepted." She had that peculiar human trait of finding everything adorable, especially things that could theoretically digest her in under 3 minutes. The Zephyrians, bless their scaled hearts, had been very clear about the research parameters. Ambassador Kethara had delivered a presentation that could have doubled as a horror movie trailer about their local apex predators, the shadow stalkers. Picture, if you will, something that looks like a cross between a panther, a dragon, and your worst nightmare, with the hunting instincts to match. Adults stood about 4 feet at the shoulder, weighed roughly 300 pounds, and had teeth that could crack starship hull plating. Under no circumstances, Kethara had said, her tongue flicking nervously, should anyone approach the shadow stalkers or their offspring. They are apex predators. They hunt in coordinated packs. They have never, in 10,000 years of recorded history, shown mercy to any creature they consider prey. The entire research team nodded solemnly. Well, almost the entire team. Becca was too busy doodling what appeared to be stick figures of herself, petting various alien creatures in the margins of her notes. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Shadow stalkers, despite being the galaxy's most efficient killing machines, had one tiny, insignificant weakness that nobody bothered to mention in the official reports because, frankly, who would have thought it mattered? They were absolutely terrible parents. Not in a forget-to-pack lunch way, but in a abandon cubs for days at a time while hunting way. Evolution had made them perfect killers, but apparently skipped the parenting classes. The cubs would be left in hidden dens while the adults went off on extended hunting trips, sometimes for up to a week. Which brings us to day 12 of what was supposed to be a routine botanical survey. Becca was out collecting samples of the local moss equivalent, something called crystal fungus that apparently tasted like chicken if chicken were made of pure energy. When she heard it, a sound that would have sent any sensible species running in the opposite direction. Mewling. Not just any mewling, mind you, but the kind of soft, pitiful crying that evolution specifically designed to make mammals want to adopt everything in sight. The kind of sound that bypasses all logical thought processes and goes straight to the must protect the baby center of the brain. "Oh no," she whispered, because even Becca wasn't completely immune to basic survival instincts. She knew that baby predators usually meant parent predators somewhere nearby, probably with strong opinions about strangers approaching their offspring. But then she heard it again. Weaker this time, more desperate. And that's when Becca's human brain did what human brains do best. It completely ignored every single piece of sensible advice she'd ever received and went into full protective mode. She found them about 50 meters from their den. Two shadow stalker cubs, probably no more than a few weeks old, huddled together and crying. They were tiny, barely the size of house cats, covered in the softest-looking midnight blue fur she'd ever seen. Their oversized paws and disproportionately large heads screamed, "Baby animal," in the universal language that makes sensible beings do incredibly stupid things. "Oh, you poor little things," Becca cooed, apparently forgetting that these poor little things would grow up to be apex predators capable of hunting grown Zephyrians for sport. "Where are your parents?" The cubs looked up at her with enormous golden eyes that seemed to reflect starlight. And that was it. Game over. Becca's last remaining brain cell packed up and went on vacation. Now, any other species would have called for backup, established a perimeter, maybe done a quick environmental scan to make sure Mama wasn't coming back anytime soon. Humans? Humans see baby animal in distress and immediately assume personal responsibility for fixing the situation. Becca carefully approached the cubs, making the soft clicking sounds that seem to calm most young mammals. The cubs, who had probably never seen a human before, but were smart enough to recognize potential food source when they saw it, stopped crying and started making what could generously be called purring sounds. Okay, Becca muttered, pulling off her oversized research hoodie. "Let's get you somewhere safe while we figure out where your family went." She gently scooped up the cubs. "And yes, I can hear you xenobiologists screaming from here," and tucked them into her hoodie. The cubs, apparently deciding that this tall, warm, soft creature was an acceptable substitute parent, immediately curled up and fell asleep. And this is where our story takes a turn from mildly concerning to full diplomatic incident. Back at the research station, the morning shift change was about to begin. Senior Researcher Chen was preparing to brief the incoming team when his comm unit started flashing with priority messages. The first few were routine: weather updates, supply manifest confirmations, the usual bureaucratic nonsense that keeps research stations running. Then came the message from the Zephyrian settlement. 2 shadow stalker cubs have gone missing from den site Gamma 7. Adult pack showing signs of extreme agitation. Request immediate assistance in search and recovery. This is a priority alpha situation. Chen nearly choked on his morning coffee substitute. Priority alpha meant potential loss of life. It meant the kind of situation that got research stations shut down and scientists sent home in disgrace. "Martinez," he called out, because Becca was scheduled for the early collection run. "Martinez, report to command immediately." No response. "Computer, locate Dr. Rebecca Martinez." "Dr. Martinez is currently in Habitat Module C Quarter 7. Chen frowned. That was odd. Becca was supposed to be out in the field by now. She was many things: chaotic, impulsive, a walking violation of safety protocols. But she was never late for field work. He headed to her quarters, already composing the strongly worded message he'd have to send to the Oversight Committee about researchers not following check-in procedures. He found her door unlocked, which was the first red flag. The second red flag was the soft humming coming from inside. The third red flag was that the humming was interspersed with what sounded like baby talk. "Martinez," he knocked. "Are you in there? We have a situation." "Oh, hey, Chen." Becca's voice was unusually bright and cheerful. "I'm just taking a personal day, feeling a bit under the weather." Chen's frown deepened. Becca had never taken a sick day in her life. The woman had once continued collecting samples while running a fever, that would have hospitalized most other species. "Open the door, Martinez. That's an order." "Actually, I don't think that's a great idea right now. How about we catch up later, maybe over lunch?" The humming resumed, along with what was definitely baby talk. Chen was starting to get a very bad feeling about this. "Martinez, the Zephyrians have lost 2 Shadow Stalker cubs. We need all hands on deck for the search and recovery operation. Open this door, or I'm using my override code." The humming stopped abruptly. About that." Chen's blood pressure spiked. "Martinez, what did you do?" "Well, you see, it's kind of a funny story." "Open the door." There was a long pause, followed by some shuffling sounds, and what Chen could have sworn was whispering. Finally, the door slid open to reveal Becca wearing her pajamas, and an expression that screamed, "I have made a series of questionable life choices." "So," she said with a kind of forced casualness that immediately made Chen suspicious. "Hypothetically speaking, what would happen if someone accidentally adopted some local wildlife?" Chen stared at her. "Adopted?" "Rescued. I meant rescued." "Martinez, please tell me you didn't—" That's when the soft mewling started again, coming from somewhere inside her quarters. Chen closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, Becca was attempting to casually lean against her doorframe while simultaneously trying to block his view of the room. Those wouldn't happen to be the missing Shadow Stalker cubs, would they? "Define missing," Becca said hopefully. "The ones the Zephyrians are currently mobilizing their entire defense force to find?" Becca's face went through several interesting color changes. "Their entire defense force? That seems like an overreaction." "Martinez," Chen said with the patience of a man who had dealt with human researchers for far too long, "Shadow Stalkers are apex predators. The Zephyrians consider them a cornerstone species for their ecosystem. The loss of cubs represents a potential threat to their entire planetary food web." "But they're so tiny," Becca protested. "And they were alone. Their parents just abandoned them." "They were not abandoned. Shadow Stalkers leave cubs in secure dens while hunting. The parents will return." "But what if they don't? What if something happened to them?" The mewling got louder, and Chen caught a glimpse of something small and dark blue moving around inside Becca's quarters. "How many are there?" "2, Becca admitted reluctantly. "And before you ask, they're fine. I've been feeding them nutrient paste, and they seem to like it. They're actually very sweet. They purr when I pet them." Chen massaged his temples, feeling a headache coming on. "You've been petting them?" "They're babies, Chen. Baby animals need affection for proper psychological development. They're predator babies. They need their parents and their natural environment. They need to be safe and fed and loved." And there it was, the fundamental difference between human and sensible species thinking. Most beings see a baby predator and think future threat. Humans see a baby predator and think adoption opportunity. The communication system chose that moment to start blaring emergency alerts. "This is Ambassador Cathara to Research Station Kepler 442b. We have activated full search protocols for the missing cubs. All human personnel are to remain in secure areas until further notice. The adult pack is showing signs of extreme distress and may pose a threat to station personnel." Chen and Becca looked at each other. "Extreme distress?" Becca asked. "The kind that results in protective parents tearing apart research stations looking for their offspring," Chen explained grimly. That's when they heard it. A low, resonant howl coming from somewhere outside the station. It was the kind of sound that made your bones vibrate and your subconscious start calculating the fastest route to the nearest bunker. The cubs in Becca's quarters immediately responded with excited chirping sounds. "Oh, no," Chen whispered. "Oh, no, what?" Becca demanded. "They're calling to their parents." Sure enough, the howling got closer and was soon joined by answering calls from multiple directions. The entire Shadow Stalker pack was converging on the research station. "Okay," Becca said, backing into her quarters. "This might be a problem." "Might be a problem?" Chen's voice cracked. "Martinez, you've essentially kidnapped the children of the galaxy's most efficient predators. Their parents are probably planning to turn this entire station into modern art." The cubs, meanwhile, had apparently decided that all the excitement meant it was playtime. Chen caught glimpses of them tumbling around Becca's quarters, making happy little chirping sounds, and completely oblivious to the diplomatic crisis they'd created. "Emergency stations," came the announcement over the comm system. "All personnel report to secure positions immediately. This is not a drill." Chen grabbed Becca's arm. "We need to get to the command center, now." "But the cubs, bring them. We need to figure out how to return them before their parents decide to redecorate the station with our internal organs." Becca scooped up the cubs, who immediately curled up in her arms and started purring. And they rushed toward the command center. The howling was getting louder and closer, and Chen was starting to understand why the Zephyrians had classified Shadow Stalkers as apex predators. They burst into the command center to find the rest of the research team in various stages of panic. Dr. Sarah Kim was frantically pulling up defensive protocols that the station wasn't actually equipped to handle, while Dr. James Wong was trying to establish communication with the Zephyrian settlement. "Chen!" Kim looked up from her console. "Thank God you're here. The Zephyrians are reporting multiple adult Shadow Stalkers heading directly for the station. ETA, approximately 10 minutes. "I found the cubs," Chen announced grimly. The entire command center went silent, except for the soft purring coming from Becca's arms. "You found them?" Wong's voice was carefully controlled. "Where were they?" "In Dr. Martinez's quarters." All eyes turned to Becca, who was attempting to look innocent while two baby apex predators used her as a climbing gym. "They were abandoned," she protested. "I was rescuing them." "You were what?" Kim's voice reached a pitch that probably violated several regulations about noise levels in enclosed spaces. "They were all alone and crying. Their parents left them." "That's normal behavior for the species," Wong exploded. "The adults hunt while the cubs remain in the den." "But what if something happened to the adults? What if they never came back?" "Then natural selection would take its course," Kim shot back. "That's how ecosystems work." The cubs, sensing tension in the room, started making distressed chirping sounds. Becca immediately began making soothing noises and gently stroking their fur. "Look at them," she said softly. "They're just babies. They were scared and hungry and alone. How could I just leave them there?" And there it was again. The fundamental human inability to ignore a creature in distress, regardless of long-term consequences or personal safety. "Because," Chen said gently, "their parents are currently outside planning what we can only assume is a very creative revenge scenario." As if summoned by his words, a bone-shaking roar echoed through the station's hull. It was the kind of sound that made your primitive brain's stem start screaming about immediate relocation to another planet. The cubs perked up immediately, chirping excitedly and squirming in Becca's arms. "They know their parents are here," Wong observed. "Great," Kim muttered. "So how exactly do we return kidnapped predator cubs to parents who are probably planning to use our skeletons as toothpicks?" "Very carefully," Chen said, "and probably with a lot of apologizing." Ambassador Cathara's voice crackled over the comm system. "Research Station Kepler 442b, we have visual confirmation of the adult pack surrounding your facility. Please confirm status of missing cubs." Chen keyed the comm system. "Ambassador, we have the cubs." "You have recovered them from the predators?" "Not exactly. Dr. Martinez found them and took them into protective custody." There was a long pause. When Cathara spoke again, her voice was very carefully controlled. "Are you telling me that a human researcher removed shadow stalker cubs from their den?" "They were apparently abandoned." "They were not abandoned. This is normal behavior. The adults were hunting." Another roar shook the station, this one even closer. "Ambassador," Chen said quickly, "we need guidance on how to safely return the cubs without triggering a full-scale attack." "You need to..." Cathara's transmission was cut off by what sounded like urgent voices in the background. When she came back online, she sounded slightly panicked. "The pack leaders are showing signs of extreme agitation. We're reading elevated stress pheromones and aggressive posturing. You need to return the cubs immediately." "How do we do that without getting eaten?" Kim asked practically. I don't know. In 10,000 years of recorded history, no one has ever been stupid enough to steal Shadowstalker cubs. The research team exchanged glances. "Great," Wong muttered. "We're making history." The cubs, meanwhile, had apparently decided that Becca's hoodie was the perfect place for a nap. They curled up in the soft fabric and started making contented purring sounds. "They really are adorable," Becca said defensively. "They're also the children of creatures that could probably chew through our hull plating," Chen pointed out. "But look at their little faces." And Chen had to admit, they did have remarkably cute faces. The kind of faces that made you want to give them treats and belly rubs, not rational thoughts about potential future dismemberment. "Okay," he said, forcing himself to think strategically. "We need to figure out how to approach this situation. The parents are outside. They know their cubs are here, and they're probably not in a negotiating mood. What if we just open the door and let the cubs run to them?" Kim suggested. "What if the adults decide to come inside and express their displeasure personally?" Wong countered. "What if we used the environmental suits and took the cubs outside?" Becca offered. "What if the adults see us as a threat to their offspring and attack on sight?" Chen replied. They were quiet for a moment, listening to the increasingly agitated sounds coming from outside the station. "You know," Becca said thoughtfully, "they might not attack if they see that we're returning their cubs willingly. Or they might attack because we took their cubs in the first place," Kim pointed out. "Actually," Wong said slowly, "Dr. Martinez might have a point. Most intelligent species understand the concept of returning lost property." "These aren't lost property," Chen said. "They're offspring. The emotional attachment is completely different." Another roar, this one accompanied by what sounded like claws scraping against metal. "They're trying to get in," Kim observed with remarkable calm. The cubs chirped happily and started squirming toward the sound. "They want to go to their parents," Becca said. "Of course they do," Chen replied. The question is how we facilitate that reunion without becoming part of the food chain. Ambassador Kethara? Wong keyed the comm. What do you recommend for safely returning the cubs? Honestly, I don't know. We've never had this situation before. Shadow stalkers are typically avoided, not adopted. They weren't adopted, Becca protested. They were rescued. The distinction may be lost on their parents, Kethara replied dryly. The scraping sounds were getting louder and more insistent. I think we're running out of time for strategic planning, Kim said. Chen looked at his team, then at Becca holding the cubs, then at the reinforced door that was starting to show stress marks. All right, he said. Here's what we're going to do. Dr. Martinez, you're going to take the cubs to the main airlock. The rest of us will monitor from a safe distance and be ready to seal emergency bulkheads if things go badly. What if the adults attack her? Wong asked. Then we'll have learned something important about shadow stalker behavior, Chen replied grimly, and probably need new research staff. That's not very reassuring, Becca said. Would you prefer I lie to you about the potential outcomes? Becca considered this. Actually, yes. Everything will be fine, Chen said in the most unconvincing tone possible. The cubs will be safely returned to their loving parents, who will undoubtedly express their gratitude for our excellent childcare services. That's better. Still obviously false, but better. The cubs, apparently sensing that something important was about to happen, started making excited chirping sounds and climbing up Becca's hoodie. They know they're going home, she said softly. Let's just hope home doesn't include a side of revenge, Kim muttered. They made their way to the main airlock, the rest of the team taking positions behind blast barriers while Becca approached the controls. You know, she said conversationally, this seemed like such a good idea this morning. Most disasters start with good intentions, Chen replied. It's practically the human motto. That's actually pretty accurate. Dr. Martinez, came Ambassador Kethara's voice over the comm. The adult pack has positioned themselves directly outside your main airlock. They appear to be waiting. Waiting for what? For their cubs, I assume. Becca looked down at the two small predators currently using her as a jungle gym. They were purring contentedly and seemed completely unaware that their parents were probably planning increasingly creative forms of vengeance just outside the door. Okay, she said, taking a deep breath. Here goes nothing. She activated the airlock sequence, and the outer door began to cycle open. The sound that greeted them was unlike anything they'd heard before. A deep, thrumming vocalization that seemed to carry complex emotional information. It wasn't quite a roar, not quite a howl, but something that spoke of parental concern and barely contained aggression. The cubs immediately responded, chirping excitedly and squirming toward the sound. I think that's Shadow Stalker for "Where are my babies?" Wong observed. Let's hope it's not Shadow Stalker for "I'm about to redecorate this station with researcher parts," Kim replied. Becca stepped into the airlock, and the cubs became even more excited, making happy little trilling sounds. They definitely know they're going home, she said. The outer door finished cycling, and Becca got her first look at the adult shadow stalkers. Oh, she breathed. They were magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. 4 adults arranged in a semicircle around the airlock, their midnight blue fur rippling over powerful muscles, golden eyes fixed intently on the cubs in Becca's arms. They were easily twice the size she'd expected, and the intelligence in their gaze was unmistakable. The largest of the adults, presumably the pack leader, took a step forward and made a low, questioning sound. The cubs responded immediately, chirping and reaching toward their parents. "I think that's the mother," Becca whispered into her comm. "Or the father," Chen replied. "Shadow stalkers have complex pack structures. Either parent could be the primary caregiver." The adult made another sound, softer this time, and the cubs became almost frantic in their attempts to get to their parents. "They want to go," Becca said. "Then let them go," Kim urged. Becca knelt down and gently placed the cubs on the ground. They immediately scampered toward the adults, making joyful, chirping sounds. The reunion was surprisingly gentle. The adults carefully sniffed and nuzzled the cubs, making soft, rumbling sounds that were clearly expressions of relief and affection. The cubs climbed all over their parents, purring loudly and clearly, telling their own version of their adventure. "That's actually kind of sweet," Wong observed. "Don't get attached," Chen warned. "We still don't know how they feel about us." As if in response to his words, the pack leader looked up at Becca, who was still kneeling in the airlock. Their eyes met, and Becca felt a moment of genuine terror as she realized just how large and dangerous these creatures really were. The shadow stalker studied her for a long moment, then did something completely unexpected. It bowed its head slightly. Did it just thank her?" Kim asked incredulously. The other adults were also looking at Becca, and while their expressions were difficult to read, they didn't seem aggressive. If anything, they seemed curious. One of the cubs broke away from its parent and bounded back to Becca, rubbing against her leg and purring loudly before returning to its family. "I think," Becca said softly, "they understand that I was trying to help." The pack leader made one more sound, a complex vocalization that somehow conveyed acknowledgement, gratitude, and a gentle warning all at once. Then the adults gathered their cubs and began to move away from the station. "Well," Chen said as they watched the shadow stalker family disappear into the forest, "that could have gone much worse." "Dr. Martinez," came Ambassador Cathara's voice. "The pack is returning to their territory. Crisis appears to be resolved." "Any idea what that last vocalization meant?" Becca asked. There was a pause. Roughly translated, it means, "Thank you for caring for our young, but please don't do it again." Becca laughed. "That's fair." "Dr. Martinez," Chen said as they cycled back through the airlock, "you are never, ever allowed on solo collection runs again." "Come on, Chen. It worked out fine." "You kidnapped the offspring of apex predators. I rescued abandoned cubs who needed help. They weren't abandoned." "How was I supposed to know that?" "Because we literally had a briefing about shadow stalker behavior. I may have been distracted during that part." Chen stared at her. "Distracted by what?" "I was trying to figure out if they might be related to earth cats. They have similar facial structure, and I was wondering if there might be some kind of convergent evolution thing happening." "You were thinking about evolutionary biology while being briefed on dangerous predator behavior?" "It's called multitasking, Chen." Dr. Kim laughed. "You know what? I think this is going in the official report as successful interspecies diplomatic contact through inadvertent childcare services." "That's not what happened," Chen protested. "That's absolutely what happened," Wong agreed. "Dr. Martinez accidentally established positive relations with a previously unstudied apex predator species by demonstrating appropriate nurturing behavior toward their offspring. "See?" Becca said brightly. "I'm a pioneer in xenological relations. You're a walking disaster with good intentions. Those aren't mutually exclusive." Chen rubbed his temples, feeling another headache coming on. The Oversight Committee is going to have so many questions. Actually, Ambassador Cathara interjected over the comm. "The Zephyrian Council would like to commend Dr. Martinez for her compassionate response to what she perceived as animals in distress. While we cannot officially endorse removing young predators from their natural environment, we recognize that her actions came from a place of genuine concern for their welfare." "See?" Becca said smugly. "Officially commended. They also want me to emphasize that future encounters with shadow stalker cubs should be reported to the authorities rather than handled personally. That's less fun, but probably safer," Becca admitted. 3 months later, Dr. Rebecca Martinez was back to her regular research duties, with the minor addition of mandatory supervision for all field work and a strongly worded notation in her file about species-appropriate intervention protocols. The shadow stalker family had become something of a research station legend. Occasionally, members of the pack would be spotted near the station perimeter, and the cubs, now significantly larger, had been observed playing in areas visible from the research facility. "They're checking up on us," Becca insisted whenever anyone mentioned the sightings. "They're hunting?" Chen would reply. "This is their territory. They're making sure we're okay. They're apex predators doing apex predator things. Look, there's one of the cubs now." Becca pointed toward the observation deck window, where a young shadow stalker was visible at the forest edge. The cubs seemed to sense their attention and looked directly at the window. For a moment, human and predator regarded each other across the safety of reinforced glass. Then the young shadow stalker did something that made the entire observation deck gasp. It wagged its tail. "Did you see that?" Becca exclaimed. "It remembers me?" "Shadow stalkers don't wag their tails," Chen said automatically, then paused. "Do they?" According to the behavioral database, tail movements in shadow stalkers typically indicate either aggressive intent or territorial marking. Dr. Kim consulted her tablet. Rhythmic tail movement as a friendly gesture is not documented. The young shadow stalker wagged its tail again, then bounded away into the forest. "Well," Wong said thoughtfully, "I guess we're documenting it now." And that, dear readers, is how Dr. Rebecca Martinez accidentally revolutionized our understanding of shadow stalker social behavior, established the first recorded positive contact between humans and Zephyrian apex predators, and proved once again that sometimes the best scientific discoveries come from humans doing exactly what they're told not to do. The official report, filed with the Interspecies Research Council, read, "Successful establishment of peaceful relations with previously unstudied apex predator species through demonstration of appropriate parental care behaviors." The unofficial report, shared among researchers over drinks, read, "Human sees baby animals. Human adopts baby animals. Baby animals' parents surprisingly okay with this because humans are weird and apparently non-threatening, despite being from a species that conquered half the galaxy through sheer stubborn determination." Both reports were accurate. And if you're ever on Research Station Kepler 442b and happen to see a young shadow stalker wagging its tail at humans through the observation windows, just remember, somewhere out there is a xenobotanist who thinks the most dangerous predators in the galaxy just need a little love and understanding. She's probably right. Don't tell Chen I said that.